I'm going to cover some of my thoughts about what's been going on in the world from a technological standpoint and then also from a sociological standpoint. So I'm uniquely qualified in that I've spent my career working at companies like Facebook, Meta, IBM, Red Hat, Microsoft, but also I've been deeply interested in social skills. So I would consider myself a master networker at meeting people. I'm a musician, so I'm on stage and performing, but in order to do that, you really have to get out and meet people and engage people. And this channel here is about meshing those worlds together into something that's useful and interesting for you. If you have any interest in technology, maybe you have some musical inclinations, but you're interested in communication skills and self-development, that's what I've been studying for over a decade. I've been to all the top seminars, I've been to the boot camps, to the trainings, I've been out in the real world, done all the things. And these skills are critically important. So even if you're, let's say, a technology person or you're in some industry, you have to have those social skills in order to communicate your message, your idea. And so much of what we do now is about content creation and reaching out to people. Even if you never wanted to be that, if you never wanted to do that in your life, it's become such a critical skill. So if you're an entrepreneur, you absolutely have to be able to do that. You can meet people in real life. You're going to use your communication skills there, but you need to be able to utilize the tools that are available through social media and in a variety of different areas. You need to have a target in a market that you're going to look for, but the most important thing is to be able to tell your message. And this is true if you're trying to get a job. For example, if you want to interview, I'm in technology, so in order to get these positions, you can't just be skilled and have the technical ability. You have to be able to demonstrate and communicate that. Now, if you're a developer, there is a deeper focus on demonstration of ability, and that's critically important. But on the same token, if you can't communicate your ideas, if you're going to work in an organization, you'll be working with other people. So you have to be able to communicate. You can't just be in a cave by yourself. If you're some super developer, then maybe you should do your own thing. If you're an entrepreneur, you need to be able to enroll and communicate people into your idea, into your vision of what you're doing. It's, as an entrepreneur, you're not just doing this for yourself, you're building something for people. It's a product or a service that you're offering to the world. And it doesn't make any sense if you're just going to build that. How are you going to get that in front of people? That's where the marketing comes into play. In order to do that, you have to have great communication skills. So you might be the one doing that as the owner, operator, CEO, entrepreneur, or you might be hiring somebody to do it. But if you're the head of that, you are the face of that. And if you're an employee, you're the face of your own career. You have to be able to interface and interview with people. And as we all know, it's so much more than just going online and applying to jobs, because now the market is so crazy where you have to apply to hundreds of positions. Could you imagine a decade ago where you had to do that? Even for professional jobs, it wasn't really a thing. You might apply for like 10 or 20, but now it's like hundreds that you have to do. And so developing that personal brand and that identity is more important than ever. So, I talk about technology a lot because I like to think about the change that AI is going to have in our lives. And so I think that matters basically no matter what industry you're in, you're going to be impacted. And I can speak to you from this experience because I've worked at companies like Microsoft, at Facebook, at IBM, at Red Hat. All of these companies are working with artificial intelligence and are innovating in one way, and they're utilizing these tools. And I see it firsthand, the impact it's going to have on software and development. And we're seeing it with the customer service positions. Those are actually pretty easy to automate. Now, in that case, it actually solves an interesting problem, because if you've ever called, let's say, for an airline when there's a massive outage or you're stuck somewhere, you can't get a hold of a representative. So it's actually potentially a real net positive for customers if they can have an intelligent agent to help them with their problem. Now, of course, what we don't want, right, is the stupid phone tree problem that we all get so frustrated with, which isn't helpful. But if you can have intelligent design that actually fixes that through artificial intelligence, it allows a business to scale beyond it. Now, Obviously, unfortunate for the people in the customer service industry, that's going to massively impact them. So if you're in that type of industry, you have to adapt your skills. If you're a software developer, you have to adapt your skills to use these technologies. If you're in the medical field, you need to be using this to update your knowledge. And then when you're using a general model, you need to find ways to learn from ones that use accredited sources. So that goes into prompt engineering. And there's going to be specialized solutions that I know some already exist in the medical field that are trained specifically on medical documentation. And that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're using large language models, AI, is that if you have a general model that's trained on all of the internet's knowledge, I always joke, that model is probably trained on all the Reddit posts, the random trolling, and it's amazing that it actually works as well as it does because there's so much bad information out there. If you put the garbage in, you're going to get the garbage out. And that is the reason you see odd answers from your large language model. And that's why you need to question it too, because if it's statistically looking at what the correct answer is, what it seems as correct, it's just saying the most statistically significant answer. That doesn't mean it's not a truth seeker. It's not an oracle. It has nothing to do with that. It's making correlations. And just because something is more strongly correlated because a lot of people have said it based in the data set that it had, that doesn't mean it's right. It's not investigating. And hopefully that's where AI agents can dive more into that, where it can actually start to take actions, because that's how a human goes about it. We take tests and we have to have a scientific method to understand if things are actually accurate or not and verifiable. Right now, the large language model it struggles with that, but it's obviously going to get better. Then we have data poisoning that I think is going to be happening and already is happening. So what we now need to watch out for is you can use AI and you can flood. If you've looked at your LinkedIn posts recently, you can see it's so much garbage AI generated content. It's frustrating to look at the way everything is formatted. And if you knew somebody before, you might see them posting, they're talking in a way that isn't really even them. And that's a really interesting thing that's going on. So what I'm concerned about is now that you can at scale use artificial intelligence to create fake content, you then, if you train on that information, it's going to further skew information. So, if there's a world event or something that's happening, then if it's mostly bad information that comes out about it, the large language model doesn't know that, let's say only one source is correct, that one source, but 99 other sources say this thing. Well, with current technology, it's going to go with the 99 sources because it's more statistically significant. How do you find that one source, that 1% that is actually correct? That's what's missing right now. And at least that's the value that humans can currently offer, if you're smart and intelligent about it, is to use your knowledge. Now, this also offers great opportunity. I was thinking about if you have an IQ of, let's say, average. In some cases, you could be at a disadvantage for certain types of work. But this is where, if you are going to be an entrepreneur or a business owner, there's a great leverage, because you don't necessarily have to be smarter to be a successful entrepreneur. In fact, there's plenty that have made tons of money who might not even be considered that intelligent. But the reality of it is it does take some intelligence, because you have laws and regulations and you have a lot of things to juggle and to manage and to do. But what I'm getting at here is, if you now have potentially infinitely high intelligence, if we're talking an average IQ of 100, but in the future we have artificial intelligence that has an IQ of like 1,000 or 3,000, just because, let's say somebody has an average IQ of 100, right? And somebody has 150 or 180 going towards like in the Einstein type IQ. Okay, but what is the difference between somebody with an IQ of 100 and somebody with 150, and they're both utilizing an AI that has an intelligence of 1,000? Now there's some marginal difference there, but the gap, I think, could get smaller and smaller based on the access to tools that you have. So I think the real divider of people who will be able to be successful and make the best judgment calls, the fastest decisions, business analysis, whatever it might be, is going to be who has access to the best artificial intelligence technology. And that's why there is a nation state race for it, and a lot of controversy around that, because it's a very complicated topic in that we have allowed the technology companies to ingest all of the world's data. Now, there's arguments that that doesn't violate the current copyright laws because it is looking at supposedly publicly available information, such as this video, I'm sure, and then it's using it, and then it's making statistical conclusions based on the information that it ingested. But there's a really interesting, I saw it was in Congress recently, and I don't know what's been proven or not, but some of the large language model providers actually use torrented data to train their models. And that's a whole different category of issue, because if you can prove that they stole data, they didn't pay for it, we're talking a bunch of books, software, magazines, newspapers, whatever, in that giant trove of torrented data of world's information, that is different, because if that's premium paid content and you're training on that, the training of it might not be illegal depending on how you look at it and what jurisdiction you're in, but depending on the country. Now, if you're in certain parts of Europe, it's different versus the United States, but generally in the United States, if you're accessing stolen data that you didn't pay for, that's infringement right there, and especially if you're a large company for profit on it. But the issue that happens here is because we say it's a matter of national security, that we are in an arms race with other countries. That's going to justify it, override the wrongdoing of millions of creators. And it brings into question, basically, the freedoms from a United States perspective, of the rights of creators and content holders. So what rights do you even have anymore if your information can just be ingested and regurgitated, and now you can just emulate a person? And if you want to be successful right now, you can say, well, you don't have to put your stuff online, but online now is essential for businesses. And the way that the data was taken and trained at the time, there wasn't a way to say, opt out. People had copyright notices and things like that, but the information was just ingested, and it's a really interesting argument that is basically, I don't think there's any hope for it, because it's going to happen. There might be lots of lawsuits. I know there's a New York Times one going on right now, and that's something interesting you should know about OpenAI, ChatGPT. Even if you think your data is deleted, it's actually being retained through what's called a legal hold. There's a lot of companies that are on legal hold, but they don't really broadcast. It's not something that's widely known to a general audience. I know this from my information security background and working at various companies, that legal holds exist, which means when you're a user or an employee and you delete your data on the actual backend, it might look like it's deleted to you, but it's not. It's retained indefinitely until, if there's a court jurisdiction or something going on, that is lifted. So it could be 10 years, it could be more. And the reason that can be concerning for some people is the companies have an argument, this is OpenAI's argument, is that it puts all users at risk. What it's saying is, if you're a user, you want to do a temporary chat, you want to delete your information, it's not actually deleted. And it does put them at greater cyber risk exposure. In some ways, though, it's also I'm sure it's self-serving argument for that company, in that it's like any other data. So the only difference really is the quantity of data that they're amassing. So it does add to complexities in how you manage that data. It's also going to add to expense if you think you have to think about, as a user, all of your queries and images and data, if all of those things now have to be indefinitely stored, it's pretty massive on the back end of what these companies store. So there's so much that go into it, even if you're not on the technological side, that you wouldn't even be aware of. But these things are impacting us, at a high level. And when you use these services, these are impacting you on kind of an invisible way. And this ties in with social media as well. What I realized, one thing, for example, is with the meta services like Instagram and Facebook, interestingly, they don't like you to delete your post, your story, your data. It costs them money, but you can see that they don't want you to delete it, because when you share things like stories, those are temporary. But why are they not? They're not immediately deleted. It's not like a Snapchat type of environment. It is just archived and it's there. The reason it's kept is because it has valuable data information about who interacted with it and all the correlations that these algorithms can learn off of. And so they want the available data to form better and better profiles of the customers, and that's how they target you. Now, I see it from both ends. As a business person, I want to be able to get my message in front of the people, and I'm sure you probably want to get your message in front of the people that you're trying to reach. On the same token, there's people who want more privacy. And honestly, there's not really a good solution right now if you're going to use these services, because they are just so entrenched in tracking you all over the place. It's just the cross-tracking between devices, and it was really interesting when Apple implemented that massive change. It had a major impact on Facebook, on Meta, for the ability to track. And so as an advertiser, it's great. There's two trains of thoughts with it. If you're going to get advertised, would you rather get things that are super hyper relevant to you that you're interested in, or would you rather see things that are totally irrelevant? Now, it depends. If you value your privacy overall, then maybe that's what you want. But I would argue then you shouldn't even be on these social media services if that's such a major issue to you. And it's just like, everything that you do now, when I'm here in the city, if you walk out in the city, there's cameras everywhere. You just have to assume that everything that you do is being tracked. So that's why I'm a very open person with, most everything that I do. And I believe in freedom of expression, in speech. And the thing is, we have to allow people to make mistakes. It's okay. You're going to say stupid things that you might not even think or believe in a year. The problem is when things go viral online, that takes on a life of its own. Those things can live forever, and it's hard to overwrite that narrative. When you make a mistake as a human being in the real world that we naturally evolved in, it lasts for just that moment. Now, if you're in a tribe, you can, the consequences are bad. You can eventually get exiled or have mating opportunity issues with it because you just get outcast based on certain things that happen. Yes, that's true, but that required, in most cases, direct, in a way, people that were there and involved. Now, there was like the witch trials and things like that. It's interesting that there weren't actually many involved in the actual witch trials, but they got so much attention in the Americas during the earlier founding ages. But regardless of that, my point is, now if you do some screw up on the street out here, that can go worldwide to an entire worldwide audience because you had one moment of bad judgment. Or I don't drink, but if somebody's out, drunk and they do something stupid, they're having fun and they say something stupid and that's recorded and now that's perpetuated. It's a career destroyer. That's why I think you really need to use your judgment when you see these things. It's just fear bait. It's all those types of things that we're going to see more of that. And when I see it, I have to step back. I've been trying to do this on social media. I think it's a valuable thing for anyone to practice. When you want to engage with something on social media, think of that as another human being. Now, they might be a bot, and that's a whole different discussion, but generally the people I'm interacting with on my social media accounts are people that I've added and that have followed me for my music. I'm fairly high confidence that they're real. So I try to interact with them as if they are, an actual human in front of me. And there's something that doesn't trigger well inside of our brain because we're staring at a screen, we're overstimulated with information, and everyone does this. You say things that you wouldn't say in person. And that's an interesting sociological thing because that comes from, so for example, alpha male dominance. If there's a really strong alpha male, who has social status in an environment, and some smaller beta male tries to, would say something ridiculous online, that they would never say to that person in a certain environment. It's so easy to say it online, right? And you can't really necessarily see the size of that person. The status isn't there. It's just text. You're overloaded. So it's such an interesting trick that it plays on our brain in so many different scenarios. And it's going to be really interesting to see, though, we already have algorithms that are running, but as we further get AI optimization, my biggest concern there is that we really just begin to interact more and more with non-humans and we don't know it. And then at some point, this weird question of, does it matter if you're enjoying it and all these things? And, if you take it to the entrepreneur side, well, I want to sell to actual people, or communication, or if you're dating, you want to meet actual people. Until we have all the Android bots that take over, and that'll be freaking weird. That's another tangent of what happens when you have a robot that can emulate, your preferred sex better than the human version of it in every way. What need is there for reproduction? Is that just ultimately the demise of the society? I like imperfections in certain scenarios, and things are supposed to be hard. The problem is we'll go towards the path of least resistance. You get the dopamine and norepinephrine. I can't even say the word, but you'll get the release. An interesting argument I heard around this, though, is if you get too much dopamine release, you get too much reward, then the humans might actually start to regulate themselves. If you're in VR and it's too much, it's constantly overstimulating your brain, you can have to say, like, okay, you can go into extreme addiction and then, you have to go into rehab for it. But humans can self-correct, if they have a level of self-control to say, well, this is too much stimulation, it's actually not good enough. But the scary, weird thing is, with an android, with, an AI robot, it could self-regulate to that too, right? Even better than a human in a very manipulative way that is just like infinitely, like you can't escape it. It's because it could learn from every possible version of iteration of everything that's out there and adapt to every possible thing that you're doing. So what do you do in that scenario? And I don't know. That's why I think there'll be breakaway civilizations that, some want to be in just a natural environment and go live in nature. And I love aspects of that. And then there'll be other people who want to be in the advanced, Neuralink chipped in society, all time VR hooked in, utopia or dystopia, depending on what happens. I've always found myself wanting to go between the two, not the full, LinkedIn, but I love playing with virtual reality, with technology and games. But then when I feel myself, getting empty through that, where it can be an empty existence, I like to get out into nature. It's a great reset and say, well, this is just what the natural world that we evolved to be in is like. So I'll leave you with that. There's some thoughts, a lot of different things. Drop a comment and subscribe if you found any of this interesting.